In the middle of the Nile's current, near the Egyptian city of Luxor, one finds the enormous royal graveyard dating to the epoch of the Egyptian pharaohs, carefully hidden from the profane eye. The site is a vast space with hills galore, which consist of soft rock. There are many ravines here that conceal ancient tombs, including those of kings, all cut into the rocky slopes of a near inaccessible mountain valley. This entire upland area is located in the gigantic bight on the western bank of the Nile. It is possible that this place was once known as the Bight of the Kings. The modern Egyptian city of Luxor can be found right across the Nile, on the eastern bank of the river. Egyptologists are of the opinion that Luxor had once been the famous ancient city of Thebes. The very name Luxor may be Slavic in origin, derived from Luca-Sari, which is Bight of the Kings. Luxor and the nearby Egyptian town of Karnak is where we find the two gigantic ancient Egyptian temples. On the western bank, one sees the two Cyclopean stone statues of sitting pharaohs. These are the famous colossi of Memnon. All these constructions appear to have been part of the royal necropolis as a single funereal complex. Several other ancient temples that one finds nearby must have belonged to the same complex, among those the Temple of Dendera, named after the city where it is located. The modern Egyptian town of Esna is a little bit further down the Nile. It is considered to stand on the site of the ancient Latopolis. Several temples with zodiacs are located nearby. It was precisely in Dendera and Esna that gigantic stone zodiacs were discovered. They come from the ceilings of the two temples. There are 4 such zodiacs altogether. There may be others in existence, but they remain unknown to the new Chronology project team. Each one of them has got a certain date ciphered therein, which may relate to the holy events that said temples were consecrated to. The proximity of both Dendera and Esna to the royal necropolis gives us reasons to believe all of these zodiacs to be of a funereal nature. The zodiacs from Dendera and Esna are much bigger than all of the Egyptian zodiacs found in the sepulchres of the Valley of the Kings. Furthermore, their style differs from that of the tomb zodiacs considerably. The zodiacs from the sepulchres of the Bight of the Kings can usually be classified as belonging to the Theban type. Here, you see zodiacs of the Theban type. They are simple murals, paint over plaster. Their interpretation is usually a rather difficult task, since constellation figures were usually omitted from such zodiacs. Anatoly Fomenko and Gleb Nosovsky deciphered the dates from all 4 zodiacs from Dendera and Esna. All these dates turned out medieval, which means that the ancient Egyptian builders were of the opinion that the holy events commemorated by the construction of the two temples had taken place in the Middle Ages. The zodiacs from the temples of Dendera date from the late 12th century AD, and the ones from Esna, to the late 14th, early 15th century. The temples themselves could therefore only have been built later than these dates. The long or rectangular zodiac of Dendera is a ceiling bas-relief carved in stone. Its size is 25 by 42.5 meters. The first estimations made by the Egyptologists about the age of the temple claimed that it predated the Common Era by 15,000 years. The dating was subsequently shifted to the beginning of the Common Era. The second Dendera zodiac, the round one, is a ceiling bas-relief carved in stone, measuring 2.55 by 2.53 meters. It was found in the antechamber of the same temple in Dendera and taken away to Europe. The original of the zodiac is kept in the Louvre nowadays. The first Egyptologists dated the Temple of Dendera to the 15th millennium before Christ, no less. Then its dating started to shift upwards, having subsequently frozen at the 3rd millennium BC. Then historians suggested to consider the long zodiac to date to the epoch of Tiberius, 14 to 37 AD, and the round zodiac to the epoch of Nero, 54 to 68 AD. When astronomers tried to verify these dates with astronomical calculations involving the horoscopes contained in the zodiacs, the results proved negative. These planetary horoscopes didn't appear until the 3rd century AD. There were two solutions: either to date the imperial Roman reigns to other centuries, or declare the horoscopes to be of a fantasy nature. Egyptologists were most reluctant to contradict the Scaligerian tradition and chose the latter, despite the fact that, according to Morozov, the veracity of both horoscopes becomes blatantly obvious. Fomenko and Nosovsky appear to be the first to have noticed the existence of secondary horoscopes in Egyptian zodiacs. This very fact allowed them to avoid the optimal interpretation problem in the efforts to date the Egyptian zodiacs. Their approach involves all possible interpretations at once, without the need to choose the best one, the way their predecessors had to do. Constellation figures are shaded red in this image. All the constellations are easily recognizable. The author's interpretation of the zodiacal constellation symbols in the long zodiac doesn't differ from the respective interpretation as found in the works of Egyptologists. Planetary figures of the primary horoscope are shaded yellow. Among them we find every single figure of a wayfarer with a planetary rod, apart from the ones that either stand on certain objects or rest their rods upon them. Planetary figures either standing or resting their rods on other objects bear no relation to the primary horoscope. These figures pertain to either secondary horoscopes or auxiliary symbols, and are as follows in the long zodiac. Young woman whose planetary rod rests upon the back of Capricorn's figure. The man with the head of a falcon, holding a planetary rod and standing over the figure of a goose. We see him between the figure of Aquarius and the edge of the zodiacal strip. The man with a planetary rod standing in a boat between the constellation of Gemini and the edge of the zodiac. A pair of women in a boat near the very end of the zodiac, left of Gemini. The one in front is holding a staff whose shape differs from that of a regular planetary rod from elsewhere in the long zodiac. It is topped in a different way. Nevertheless, we may have considered this figure as part of the primary horoscope if it hadn't stood in a boat. The red-colored object that the figure of Virgo is holding in both hands is not a rod. It is an ear of wheat. Virgo was always drawn holding an ear of wheat, in the Egyptian zodiacs, likewise the ancient European ones. Let us now turn to the woman holding a long stick in both hands, the one we find inside a circle near Libra. The circle is shaded yellow, since we have a planetary figure in front of us. Don't forget that circles were used to refer to the sun and the moon in the Egyptian zodiacs. However, planetary rods weren't used in their case. The long stick in the hands of this woman isn't an Egyptian planetary rod since it has a different top part. Also pay attention to the fact that the stick is held in both hands, whereas all the planetary figures found in the long zodiac hold the rod in just one hand. All the other figures with rods, apart from the exceptions listed here, are shaded yellow, since they are the planets from the primary horoscope. Let us provide a list. Saturn, the male wayfarer with a planetary rod in his hand, to the right of Aquarius, near the very edge of the zodiac. He has a crescent or a pair of crescent-shaped horns on his head. Thus, Saturn in the primary horoscope of the long zodiac is either in Aquarius or Capricorn. The figure of Saturn is separated from Aquarius by 5 other figures, and can be found at the very edge of the zodiacal strip. The figure we see drawn as walking in front of Saturn, the first one in this strip, marks a 10-degree segment of Capricorn. Therefore, the best position for Saturn in the long zodiac can be considered the boundary between Aquarius and Capricorn. Let us now consider all the other planets. Jupiter is the male wayfarer with a planetary rod between Pisces and Aries. We see the inscription saying Hor Opus Seta over his head, which stands for the planet Jupiter, according to Brooks. Thus, Jupiter in the primary horoscope of the long zodiac is shown either in Pisces or in Aries. The figure of Jupiter in the long zodiac is separated from both Pisces and Aries by a similar number of figures, 2 on each side. Therefore, let us consider the boundary between Pisces and Aries to be the best point for Jupiter. Mars is a male wayfarer with a falcon's head and a planetary rod in his hand, seen between Pisces and Aquarius. The inscription near his head says Hor Tesser or Hortesher, the red planet, according to Brooks' translation, or Mars. Thus, Mars in the primary horoscope of the long zodiac is shown either in Pisces or Aquarius. Since Mars in the long zodiac is separated from Pisces by the 10-degree female figure and is immediately adjacent to Aquarius, we shall consider the middle of the latter to be the best point for Mars. Venus is represented by the pair of wayfarers holding planetary rods in between Aries and Taurus. The man with the head of a beast, lion, is in front, followed by a woman with a star over her head, which is the only female planetary figure in the long zodiac. Consequently, Venus in the primary horoscope is shown in either Aries or Taurus. Visibility indicators are very important for both Venus and Mercury. The figure of Venus in the long zodiac has a star over its head, which implies that Venus was visible. Venus and the corresponding planets are separated from Taurus by 2 10-degree figures of young women and 1 planet Mercury. The precession is immediately adjacent to Aries. Therefore, the middle of Aries shall be considered the best point for Venus. Mercury is the double-faced male wayfarer holding a planetary rod in between Aries and Taurus. He has no star over his head, no visibility indicator, in other words. For Mercury this means invisibility in the rays of the Sun. Thus, Mercury was invisible during the days covered by the primary horoscope. However, Mercury reappears on the very same horoscope in a visible position. Pay attention to the pair of male wayfarers between Taurus and Gemini. The one in front has a cobra in his hands, and the one behind him carries a planetary rod and has a visibility indicator, a star over the head. The second figure looks like a canonical primary horoscope figure, and should therefore refer to some planet. However, all the planets were already listed, excluding the Sun and the Moon, which were drawn as circles and not wayfarers. This pair of male wayfarers is in close proximity to the already discovered figure of Mercury. They may therefore serve as another representation of Mercury and are unlikely to refer to any other planet, since other planets lie too far away from this location. The snake in the hands of the wayfarer in front also identifies him as Mercury. Why would Mercury have to be drawn twice? A conclusive answer can only be given after analyzing the astronomical solution. The visibility indicators are missing from the first figure of Mercury. This likely means that Mercury was invisible in the configuration of the main horoscope. The artist may therefore have intended to show the position where Mercury first becomes visible or appears most spectacular. Another option is to consider one of Mercury's figures part of a respective secondary horoscope. Both of them look vaguely like secondary horoscope figures. Indeed, the rod of the 2-faced figures is conspicuously hanging over the legs of the neighboring little animal that stands for the dawn, although without touching it. This case can therefore be considered borderline between the presence and the absence of a transposition sign, rod leaning against another object. As for the pair of male figures following Taurus, both staves would be regular planetary rods if said figures stood for Mercury in the primary horoscope, as is the case with Venus in the same zodiac. Both Venus and the figure that accompanies it carry planetary rods of the ordinary kind. In case of the second Mercury, we see the second figure hold a snake rather than a rod. Therefore, what we see in case of the second Mercury is another borderline occasion, strictly speaking. Therefore, in their computation of solutions applicable to the long zodiac, the authors considered all of the above-mentioned options to be viable. Furthermore, they tried to consider all other possible identifications of this auxiliary planetary figure, the second Mercury. However, they came up with no identifications that would make an exhaustive solution of the long zodiac feasible. Thus, Mercury in the primary horoscope of the long zodiac is drawn either in Aries-Taurus, the two-faced figure, or in Taurus-Gemini, the figure with a star. Therefore, the possible solution area for Mercury in the astronomical solution includes Aries, Taurus or Gemini. We have covered all the planetary figures of the long zodiac that look like wayfarers. There are no other figures with planetary rods. Let us now consider the celestial bodies drawn as circles. The Sun and the Moon. The case of the Sun and the Moon is a lot more complex. The reason is simple. There are 4 circles in the long zodiac. Each of them is fit to represent the Sun or the Moon. However, the primary horoscope only requires 2 circles to represent them. However, the author's approach eliminates this problem. Since we are aware of the existence of secondary horoscopes in the Egyptian zodiacs, we shouldn't be worried about the extra circles of the Sun and the Moon. The problem of choosing 2 circles out of 4 is solved very simply. We sort through all possible choice options and proceed to analyze all the resulting astronomical solutions as equal. The full solution that we shall end up with finally shall demonstrate which circles should stand for the Sun and the Moon in the primary horoscope. Other circles must pertain to secondary horoscopes, with nothing extraneous present anywhere in the zodiac. Thus, there are 4 circles in the long zodiac. The circle with an infant sucking on its thumb in Libra. The circle with the figure of a female holding a long stick near Libra. The circle with a man who holds some animal in his hands, with his arms stretched forward as if he were making an offering of this animal near Pisces, on the side of Aries. The circle on the back of Taurus. This circle has no indications. There is a narrow crescent near one of its edges. However, this doesn't necessarily identify the circle as the Moon. Such circles could also stand for the Sun in the Egyptian zodiacs. Another option is that the circle represented both the Sun and the Moon simultaneously. This version was taken into account in the calculations, but it yielded no exhaustive solutions. The most likely candidates for the Sun in the primary horoscope were seen as either the circle on the back of Taurus, or the circle near Pisces with the man making an offering. The result revealed the circle over the back of Taurus to stand for the Sun in the primary horoscope, whereas the circle near Pisces stood for the same in the secondary horoscope of spring equinox. Having defined the planets of the primary horoscope, in the present case including the optional choices for the Sun, the Moon and the auxiliary planet, the second Mercury, the authors used the Horus software to calculate all the dates when the distribution of planets over the real celestial sphere corresponded with their disposition in the long zodiac, according to each of the possible interpretation options. The result was several dozens of preliminary dates chaotically scattered across the entire interval between 500 BC and 1900 AD. The next step involved testing the dates for compliance to secondary horoscopes and planetary visibility indicators.